All right, I'm kind of hyped for today's Samsung Unpacked event because it's all about foldables. Okay, there is some new stuff for the Galaxy Watch 8 line, but hey, if you know me, you know I love all things foldable technologies, and Samsung's got some pretty big changes in store for both the Galaxy Fold and Flip lines. So let's check it out. Okay, so we're gonna start here with the Galaxy Z Fold 7 line. And as you can see, we got three main colors. We have blue, silver shadow, and jet black over here. And I'm gonna start with the blue one because I gotta admit, I do really like this blue color. Now, the first really big change is just check out how thin it is. It's 8.9 millimeters thick. When you unfold it, it goes all the way down to 4.2 millimeters. That's a pretty significant cut down. And this thing is actually barely thicker than an S25 Ultra now, which comes in at around 8.2 millimeters. It's also Samsung's lightest foldable yet at 215 grams. Comparing generation over generation, it's about 26% thinner than last year's Fold 6, and it's almost half as thin as the original Galaxy Fold, 24 grams lighter than the previous generation. You might also notice Samsung has kind of slimmed down the bezels again, and if you open up the inside, we are now looking at the biggest foldable screen on any Samsung Fold yet at 8 inches flat across. That's up from 7.6 inches on last year's phone. And I gotta say, it looks really, really nice. Now, if you're a fan of the Z Fold series, you might notice one big change is that instead, Samsung has switched away from the under display camera and we're going back to a standard hole punch 10 megapixel selfie camera. That's a really interesting decision because it's almost like Samsung is kind of retreating on its efforts to kind of hide that interior camera underneath the flexible display. But the improved quality is almost certainly going to be an upgrade for most people, and I don't really have a big issue with the hole punch camera. Moving back to the outside real quick, Samsung has what it's calling its new Armor Flex hinge right here. And like the rest of the phone, it's significantly thinner. Samsung has done some kind of internal changes to increase the stability, so it kind of spreads the pressure when you're opening the phone a little bit more evenly. That said, dust and water resistance isn't changing compared to last generation, so you're still looking at an IP48 rating. Samsung says it has done some more internal changes to really make sure water resistance is not an issue at all. Although I think a lot of people were hoping to see a little bit improvement on the dust resistance, just because sand can always be an issue with foldables, especially when you're talking about something with a hinge, but not too bothered. You'll notice that you still get your now brief, you get a personalized briefing that kind of changes throughout the day, you know, morning, afternoon, evening, before bed, stuff like that. And so ideally, this is a demo phone, so it's not gonna have the most, personalized info, but the idea is that it gives you kind of a rundown of your day. It looks at your upcoming schedule, can kind of figure out, hey, this is some news that might be relevant to you. Make sure you're staying on top of your fitness goals, news, stuff like that. And on the inside, this thing is powered by a Snapdragon 8 Elite processor, just like you get on the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Now, one other component I think people were hoping to see get a little bit bigger is the battery. Unfortunately, that's staying pat at 4,400 milliamp hours, which is the same as the Galaxy Z Fold 6. But Samsung says there should be some generation on generation battery improvements thanks to increased power efficiency from the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. The Z Fold 7 and Z Flip 7 are going to be Samsung's first phones running One UI 8 out of the box at least, which means they're going to be based on Android 16, so you're going to get some new features in the OS as well. Some of those changes include stuff like kind of optimized layouts when you're using Samsung's Galaxy AI features, so better support for Gemini Live, especially on the bigger main screen. And then in the back, we got to talk about some camera improvements because now the main camera is 200 megapixels just like you get on the Galaxy S25 Ultra. You still get a 10 megapixel telephoto camera with a 3x optical zoom. That final camera is a 12 megapixel ultra wide. Samsung is saying it's gonna have best in class image quality for those cameras. So it's gonna be a pretty strong challenger to something like the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. I do have one piece of bad news for longtime Z Fold fans. On this generation, the Z Fold 7, Samsung is no longer supporting S Pen integration. So that means even if you have an old S Pen and you want to use it on the screen, it's not going to work. Samsung says based on user behavior, usage levels was really, really low, and that by removing support for the S Pen, they were actually able to remove the digitizer layer and make the phone just that tiny bit thinner. Now, that's probably good from an overall usability standpoint, but if you're a longtime Samsung S Pen fan, that's definitely a bit of a downer. I really love this new design. I liked it when Samsung kind of trialed it with the Galaxy S25 Edge from earlier in the spring, but on the Z Fold 7, it makes so much more sense because now you have this really beautiful, elegant, thin design that's basically the same size as a regular candy bar phone, and you have an even bigger, flexible main screen, and that's really what I love about the Fold line, and it's just gotten better on this generation. But that's enough about this phone. Let's move over to the Galaxy Z Flip series and see what's going on there. Now, as you can see, it's got a very similar design as its bigger brother, the Fold, but big improvement for this generation is now you have a larger cover screen. It's going up to 4.1 inches, which is up from 3.4 inches on the Z Flip 6. And it just makes such a nice difference, especially when you consider that the Motorola Razr, this phone's biggest competition, has had kind of an edge-to-edge display for a couple generations now. Notice real carefully, the bezels are even thinner on this model. Samsung says they're down to 1.25 millimeters on the Galaxy Z Flip 7, which is the thinnest on any Galaxy smartphone to date. And we're also getting a 120 Hz refresh rate and up to 2600 nits of peak brightness on the cover screen. So that's a really nice improvement generation over generation. On top of that, with that bigger screen, Samsung has now added support for stuff like Gemini Live. And if you see sometimes on the corner, you get that now bar and now briefing, that all works on the main cover screen. And then if we flip it open to the inside, the main screen is also a little bit bigger. It's gone up to 6.9 inches, up from 6.7 on the previous model. And you're still getting that really high peak brightness. And this is kind of basically the same size as a S25 Plus, but it folds in half, so it's even more compact. Around back, you get a 50 megapixel main camera and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. And then in here, it's a 10 megapixel interior cam. And I believe that the FOV is a little bit wider now, but it's not so huge that you would notice right away. But if you like taking group selfies, maybe that's important to you. Another really big change is that the battery size is up to 4,300 milliamp hours, which is up 300 milliamp hours from the previous generation. That's a pretty noticeable increase, especially on a phone this small. Now, the downside is that unlike its bigger brother, this phone won't have a Snapdragon chip. Instead, Samsung is using its own Exynos 2500 chip, and it's going to be interesting to see how the performance is going to stack up. You still get support for, AI stuff and that, but I think people have usually preferred, at least especially on flagship phones like this, to get that higher known performance levels of a Snapdragon chip. So it'll be interesting to see how people respond to that. Now, that's kind of it with the main Galaxy Z Flip 7, but there is one new addition to the family. So here we have the Galaxy Flip 7 FE. Now, that's an interesting change because this is the first FE that Samsung has done on any of its foldables. And in a lot of ways, it's actually more like the Galaxy Z Flip 6. It does feel noticeably thicker than the regular Z Flip 7. As you can see, it doesn't have that full edge-to-edge display, and it actually has a significantly smaller 3,700 milliamp hour battery. So that's actually down from the Z Flip 6 and significantly down from the Z Flip 7. That said, this thing is significantly cheaper because it starts at $900 as opposed to $1,100 for the full fat Z Flip 7. And so if you're looking to get, maybe a slightly more affordable way to try out one of Samsung's foldable phones, especially the Flip line, it is nice to have that option. All told, I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from both the Z Flip and the Z Fold 7 lines today. And that's coming from someone who was a little disappointed by the past two generations of the Galaxy Fold series. The one issue is that the Galaxy Fold 7 is still really expensive. It starts at $2,000. And if Samsung really wants to get more foldables into people's hands, they really gotta lower that price. That said, they are somewhat doing that with the Z Flip 7, which starts at $1,100, and then you can move down to $900 for the Z Flip 7 FE. But I really like the improved designs. They feel so much better. The hinges are just a lot sleeker. The whole device is just so much more pocketable, which makes a big difference on the larger phones like the Fold 7. We're really excited to review these new phones whenever they become available. Pre-orders are live today, and general availability starts on July 25th. So for more from Engadget, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what you think about Samsung's latest foldable phones.